evening, everyone, and welcome to Political Forum. This is your chance to speak with elected officials inside the city of Chicago. My name is Mike Jacobson, and joining us today is the Alderman of the 32nd Ward, Scott Waguespack. Thank you for having us with us. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, I appreciate you having me on today.
All right,
always
folks,
enjoy being here.
So this is now your chance. If you have a question, comment, or concern for the Alderman, the number's at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. That's 312-738-1060. And please let your friends and family know that they can also watch us online live at cantv.org/hotline. All right, Alderman, so let's kick this off by first, for folks who may not know much about you, just want to explain yourself.
Well, I've been Alderman since 2007, member and leader of the Progressive Caucus of the City Council. We're 11 members now. We've built that up from the 4 that we started out with back in 2007. We had Tony Preckwinkle, the county chair, and county president was one of our members. And we've built that up over the years. I think we've become a pretty strong force, and we're looking to build that coalition as we discuss a lot of the issues that we'll probably cover tonight. But I represent the 32nd Ward on the north side, Logan Square, Bucktown, Wicker Park area, parts of Lakeview, and Roscoe Village.
Yeah, we can actually show people overhead of your information. Come on, zoom. Let's work. There we go.
That's the west side there. That was Logan Square.
Yeah.
Basically North Avenue to Addison, Racine over to Logan Square to the square there.
So when you talk about the Progressive Caucus, for folks who may not know, what does that mean, the Progressive Caucus?
Well, the Progressive Caucus to me has always meant a group of aldermen in the City Council out there to change the way things have been done for so many years in the council. It's we find progressive ways to approach different topics. It might be revenue in the city budget, looking at progressive revenue. As we look to help pay the pensions that we owe the workers. It is looking for funds for CPS, for our public schools, looking for funds for mental health clinics. And then we also just try to make sure that we're involved on different issues that affect everybody citywide. So it's not just about our individual wards, but working together to help the whole city.
All right, so folks, again, if you have a question, comment, or concern, the number's at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. Okay, so let's get started. One of the things that's been in the news is the mayor's proposal for a express train to O'Hare. It sounds, a lot of people say that sounds good, because, hey, who doesn't want to get to O'Hare quicker? Especially when you're looking at people who maybe are in the city who are not commuters, but like guests of the city. But let's delve more into this.
Sure. Well, I take the train almost every day. When I go downtown, I'm on the Blue Line. I've never found it to be problematic, except in those short time frames when you're trying to get work with everybody else. If you want to go out of the city, if you're flying out, it's the perfect place to go hop on the train, and you're there in a short time frame, relatively. And if you look at the data, Chicago has one of the fastest trains from a downtown out to the airport in the United States. If you look at 50 different cities, we're right up in there in the top 5, very consistently. So does the Blue Line need some help? Yeah, it probably needs new trains. It needs to be improved here and there. But when you look at the mayor coming out, and I think it's a boondoggle, but it's let's have a shiny new fast track train that executives and wealthy people can pay $40, $50 per ticket to go out to the airport, and they don't have to mingle with the people on the Blue Line. Well, I think that's kind of wrong-headed, but I also think even though they're saying that it's going to be free, we know nothing is free. It's a distraction, I think, from focusing on the priorities that we have with the CTA, making sure that the green, the blue, the red, the brown, the pink, and the other lines function properly, and that we're funding them properly.
That's a good point, because I take the red line, and I know going home, there's a lot of the stops, especially on the north side of town and also on the south side of town, that need rehabilitation.
Right.
Number one.
Right.
So and
the stations, we need new cars, and those things cost a lot of money. But I think people need to understand we need to subsidize public transportation. Every great city in the world subsidizes their public transportation to make sure it works the right way. We have to continue to do that. I think this is sort of a distraction, and when they say it's going to be shiny, new, you get to O'Hare faster, well, that might be true, but if you look at Toronto, for example, if you went out and Google Toronto express train and look at what happened with that, the same concept, it failed within a year because people didn't want to pay. People who ride it every day like us, we're not going to pay $50 to go take that. What happened was Toronto ended up footing the bill because the private operator, similar to what they want to do here, bailed on it, and now the city has to subsidize every ticket to the tune of I think it's $30 some, and they're now millions in the red trying to pay for that.
Wow. All right, it looks like we have our first caller of the day. Caller, are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Great show as always. I wanted to ask the Alderman, I'm a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran, and things don't seem to getting any better here in the city for us veterans. But what gets me is there's not a safe zone in Chicago, north, south, east, or west. Crime is going crazy. And yet, the aldermen and other aldermen want to have sanctuary city, which means safe zone, here in Chicago. Well, there's no other safe zone in Chicago. Why is that? If they spend the money on the people, U.S. citizens here in Chicago, they'd have extra money. But they don't because they free food, everything's free for these people. I'm Mexican-American myself. I worked hard for what I got. Why can't they go back, do it the right way? My grandmother and grandfather, it took them 10 years to do the right thing and become citizens. Why can't they do that?
Well, that was kind of a multi-part question, but I think on the first issue of being a veteran, I think the city could do a lot more for our veterans. I have family members who are veterans trying to get a lot of the services. Yes, they have to go to the VA, but when you think about the city as a whole, there's a lot more things that we could do that other cities do a lot better. When it comes to Sanctuary City, all the people who come here work hard. Everybody in the city, it's a working family city, and I don't think that the people who are coming here are laying back. I think people are working hard for every dollar that they can earn. It goes back into our economy, and I think that when you look at what has happened with Donald Trump, when you look at the president and the direction he's going, I think Chicago, when you look at how the city has evolved over time, do we have our priorities straight all the time? No. And I think you're right on that we should be looking at a lot more things that we could be fixing, including the crime issue. And public safety is always at the top of our list in my ward, and I think it should be for the entire city. And that doesn't mean necessarily we're just going to go out and hire more police. We have to have police who are better trained. We have to have a mayor who's committed to police reforms. And if we have a police department that's not hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 10 years, we've spent over $500 million in the last 10 years on police settlements alone. That doesn't include the attorney's fees, which are astronomical. Those are funds that we could be spending and prioritizing to make sure that our communities are safe as well, with economic investments in the neighborhoods, creating more jobs, and making sure that job wealth is spreading throughout every community in the city.
All right, caller, so thank you for tuning in and watching tonight. Looks like we have another caller. Caller, are you there? Do you have a question or comment?
Well, I'd like to appreciate the fact that what you're doing is very complex. And what I'd also like to say, relative to the veterans out there, is that the tax dollars that we send to the Pentagon on a yearly basis is 56 or 58% of our entire budget. And I'm not seeing any benefits out of that other than a lot of veterans who are looking for a little extra pudding from the taxpayers who've already put in 58% of all our tax money into the Pentagon. So I'd like to see more of that money go into real security for the population, which is to say infrastructure improvement, and not spending all our time and money on chasing foreigners around the city. That's silly. They work as hard as anybody and they pay taxes. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a question of priorities. And what do the people of the city want? That's why we have elections. We have the municipal elections coming up in 2019. And I think that's where people have to get out and decide, what are the priorities for the city? Is it funding our schools and our public education? Is it making sure that we have crime issues resolved by funding the right kind of public safety? And is it looking at our tax base and property taxes and the fines and the fees in the city and saying, we can do better, there's obviously other ways we could go about this. And those are all important issues that you're going to have to think about as taxpayers, as voters, over the next few months.
Yes, caller, thank you for tuning in and for your comment. So speaking of schools, there's reports, of CPS schools in need of better cleaning, and then CPS is to spend an additional $7 million to hire more custodians. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So a lot of us know about the Aramark, Sodexo Magic contracts that came out. These were heavy donors for the mayor a couple of 3 years ago. And consistently over the last 3 years, 4 years that this contract has been laid out there, CPS schools have been undercleaned. They've been underperforming. We've all seen the reports out there in the different newsreels. And, I've already come out and said we should cancel these contracts with Aramark and Sodexo Magic. I don't think that if you were hiring somebody to clean your house or hiring somebody in your business and you weren't doing a good job over a 1, 2, 3 year period that you would keep them on. Right. You would basically say, thanks, here's the last check, I'll hire somebody else. CPS and the mayor refused to do that, and what we've had is a continuation of unclean schools, unhealthy schools for our children throughout the city of Chicago, and that's got to stop. Yes, they're putting on $7 million more and hiring additional janitors, but that was after they laid off 400 janitors when these private corporations took over the cleaning. We got rid of the janitors who were unionized, who were doing a great job, and it was very few and far between that you would actually get reports back that they were ever doing a bad job. Now, individual schools, there might have been issues, but we're talking about citywide problems that we've seen. We've had one hearing on it. We actually filed a hearing request today with the mayor and the health committee. Alderman George Cardenas, who I'm working with on this, is going to hold a hearing for us, and we're going to try to pull CPS in front of us and say, we want answers, we want results. If you can't give us answers, you should cancel this contract. The problem is the mayor has taken major donations from these guys, so it might be a little hard to unravel that.
Yeah, but now actually it can be a health issue, especially like in this past year with the flu epidemic going around the city. And if you have unclean schools with young people all around it, that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and you have parents buying their own supplies, teachers buying their own supplies to make up or to clean the things that these companies should be doing. And that's taken more money out of their pockets that could be going to food, could be going to clothing for the kids. And I think that's reprehensible, and it needs to stop. I really think this is why we need an elected school board as well. Because an elected school board, I think, would look at that contract and say, we don't care if the mayor signed a privatization contract, we're willing to cut it.
Right. So you talk about the elected school board. Is this something, again, that's going to pop up again as we're looking into municipal elections? People are saying you maybe will run on that fact that, hey, we need to have an elected school board. And talk about the reason why you think there should be one.
Well, if you look at the appointees that we've had over the last several years, when you look at Forrest Claypool as the CEO and the people that were sitting on the board during the cuts to special education funding, we can talk about that as well. When you look at the contracts that Barbara Byrd Bennett signed onto, and she's now sitting in prison, you see a pattern under this mayor and the previous mayor of making decisions based on business practices that lined people's pockets. And I think an elected school board, if you had parents who came up through the local school councils and were in a position to be on the main board, I think they would take it much more to heart than people who are more concerned about what kind of profiteering there is, what kind of companies can we bring in that we're related to, and how can we make money off of these contracts.
Yeah, and you mentioned also talking about one of the faults is the special education funding for students in CPS, right? So
Yeah.
there's been funding has been reduced in the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, the cuts have been in the hundreds of millions to special education over the last few years, and these are children with disabilities. Their parents are struggling to make sure that their individualized education programs are going through CPS and that they're getting the funding and the teachers and the one-on-one or one-on-two or three education that they need with a special advisor or a special teacher. And for CPS to cut that, I think is morally reprehensible. It's unethical, and to save money, that's not the way we should be doing things in the city. And I think that they've put these children and their families at the bottom rung at CPS. We need to make sure that they're brought back up. The Progressive Caucus, we pushed this year to force hearings on this issue, and literally, the mayor called the meeting on a Friday afternoon before MLK Day. Very few people were able to show up because they called the meeting at 3 o'clock. I think it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30 in the afternoon, when no parent with a child who has disabilities would be able to make it there. It was very unfortunate. And at the same time, an hour before that meeting, they announced 60 new teachers for special ed. So it was a victory for the Progressive Caucus and many of these parents, but it's a victory that I think will ring hollow if we don't get hundreds of millions of dollars that they took out back in, and make sure each one of those kids has the teacher that they need, so that whenever one of those children loses an hour of study, to them that is a lifetime of learning for them. It really narrows down for each one of those children.
All right, folks, again, and just to recap, you're watching Political Forum. Today our guest is Alderman Scott Waguespack of the 32nd Ward. If you have a question or comment, the number's at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. All right, another thing that's really been in the news and has a lot of parents worried and just a lot of people in general worried is the lead in the water. That, the tests are showing that in the city water that people are seeing, levels of lead that are hazardous, even if they're flushing their own tap water, to flushing there. So talk about that, and this is obviously a concern.
Yeah, it's been a concern of mine for a long time. I remember I worked on water issues when I was in the Peace Corps in Africa. So I've always had, I think, an interest in making sure that clean water for everybody was something, if you don't have clean water, potable water, that is life. And you can take away life by not having that. I think that the lead and water issue is similar to what they've seen in Flint, Michigan. And obviously we can't go to the federal government for help because they have not helped Flint. And this goes back, to the last administration. They've let the state and that city try to fix things. We have a serious issue here in Chicago with lead in the water. We have really pushed for hearings and trying to get the public health department, the water department in front of us to look at the instances that have popped up, especially in our schools. A lot of people might remember we were able to get a hearing about CPS schools and how many schools had lead pipes that were contributing to lead poisoning in these children. I believe that any house prior to 1986 might have that in it, and what we'd like from the water department is to get them to come out publicly and say, here are the steps that we're going to take as a city. Are we going to provide short-term relief through filtering systems? Or are we going to do what other cities are doing, which is look at investing, not just in the pipes that the mayor says, hey, I'm replacing pipes up and down the streets. That's all fine and good, but those pipes that go from the street to the house are the most important ones, because those are the ones that may contain lead components or a fixture at the house. I think what we need to do is make sure that everybody out there should be calling 311, ask for a testing kit for your water. The city will send you a free testing kit. You can send it back in, and within a few weeks you'll get the results back to know whether you should be doing something further to solve your clean water problem. We tried to put a resolution in today into the city council. We were thwarted by the mayor. I think they were very upset that we were actually trying to have a public conversation about it. But I have no qualms about getting out there and saying it. I don't think we can be Flint number 2. I don't think we can be hiding this issue. And I don't think the aldermen should be filtering the story out through the water department. I think the public needs to hear directly from them saying, look at all the water reports. How widespread is this problem? How many thousands of people might be affected? And what are we going to do in the short term and then in the long term to fix this issue? We can't put our heads in the sand and look the other way.
Absolutely, especially because when you're looking at the effects of lead, especially on brain development of children, it's really something that is really scary to think about.
It is, and I think the Chicago Tribune has been doing a consistent push to make sure that this story gets out there. Michael Hawthorne in the Tribune has been, doing his research. There's other organizations who've gone out there and looked at the water issues, and I think we really, as a city, this is one of the most important issues out there. A little bit of lead in the water can create a lot of problems in a child in their development, and if we don't tackle this issue now and say, instead of a ridiculous express train to O'Hare, can we focus on the lead and water issue, or can we focus on education or public safety? And this is where I think you get frustrated as a voter, a taxpayer, as an alderman, where you see the priorities are just not what they should be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on. More news out of today. The Cook County Democratic Party has leadership change. Like out is Joe Barrios as chair, and in is Toni Preckwinkle, which is making history as the first woman and also the first African American to hold this post.
Yeah.
So I think, were you there today when she was?
I was, yeah.
So talk about that.
Well, it was pretty exciting. I know I worked with Toni Preckwinkle, as I said at the beginning of the show, as an alderman for a few years. She was great to work with there. And as she moves into this role of the chair of the Cook County Democrats, I hope that she's able to take to heart what a lot of the progressives said, which was, we want the party to be more open. We want the party to go out to the communities and say, what is it that you as voters want to see change? Not the old boy network, the old Ed Burke, Joe Barrios and others who controlled it with an iron fist for many years, and before that as well. But having an African American woman at the helm now, I think, is very important. It will hopefully address many of the party issues that we have out there. But the meeting itself was very exciting. And we also have a young Latino, Mike Rodriguez from Little Village. I've worked with him in the past, and he's on the executive side as well. So we had some changes with the committeemen moving in to these positions. I think it'll bring in a good group of young people with different ideas about how the Cook County Party should work, Democratic Party, and I'm excited about it. And I think Toni will be a great leader, continue to be on the party side of it. There are a couple changes. We're going to be looking at judicial retention as well, and trying to focus more on the types of judges that we get in there to make sure they're qualified, or better qualified than in the past. And for the first time, I think in many decades, the party also voted to split away the committee that looks at Supreme Court judges, appellate judges, and circuit court judges, and that was under the control of Ed Burke. And there was a vote today to split that committee up so that he didn't have full control over it. Mm-hmm. And that was a very significant moment that I'm not sure everybody picked up on.
Interesting. And then finally, we're just about wrapping up the show, but I got to bring this up, patting actually CAN-TV on the back. Today, at City Council, a proclamation was heard, and City Council recognized CAN-TV's 35 years in existence. And so, can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, I think, in the City Council, we get these resolutions, a lot of different resolutions, but I think having CAN-TV, and a lot of aldermen spoke to it, about the essence of what CAN-TV provides. And I've been lucky to be able to come on the show several times over the last few years and be on some other shows that I find pretty interesting, exciting. I run into people across the city who will say, hey, I saw you on CAN-TV. CAN-TV for us has also provided coverage of different debates around the city. They provided coverage of the Progressive Caucus police reform hearings that we had throughout the city, and I really appreciate you guys doing that, because without, you don't get ABC or CBS or some of the big, network ones coming out there and sitting there for 2 hours and running the show. So for us, CAN TV has been excellent in doing that.
Well, Alderman, thank you so much, as always, for appearing tonight. I'm just going to put up your information just one more time for people need to get a hold of you, and your office number is 773-248-1330, and you can get email over to them at info@ward32.org. All right, Alderman, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again.
Appreciate it. Estrella, thank you so much for taking the calls today, and we will see you next week. And until then, everyone, have a good night.